Okay, so good day to everyone. A warm welcome to today's webinar, which will be hosted by Stephen Mccabe at one point in time. He still had another urgency, by Bostjan Gomiscek and by me, Andreas Meiszner. So good day. And the format of the webinar today was aimed to be of a discussion format, which means we try to have an open discussion around what are conceptual frameworks, what are theoretical frameworks, what are they used for. So therefore, we hope that key takeaways for you would be to understand the scope of both theoretical and conceptual frameworks, to look into practical examples on how to work with those and how to apply them within your research studies. So you're very much welcome to put forward how you use your frameworks in your research, or questions that you have on how to select a framework, and to look on how in practice frameworks will be used. So it's a hands-on practical view rather than a theoretical view. And Bostjan and I will share our insights on that, how we usually work with frameworks and where we see key differences on using them.
Actually, I would suggest that if there is somebody, not somebody, probably all of you have already thought about or even built actually your own theoretical, conceptual, I don't know how you call them. We have even different words actually for the same thing. Maybe somebody can share that with us, and we can actually then try to understand why the framework is as it is in your case. That would be probably the best. And if 2 or 3 are coming, or maybe even more, that would make it even more interesting. So I would be extremely happy that we maybe even start with questions and discussion about the frameworks. And after that, we might then explain, support it, or the, let's say, answers by theory and by the slides. So I guess that would be the best possible way. If you do agree that somebody comes with your framework and we are trying to discuss it, that I guess the best way really to understand how we do that.
Right, exactly. And just for the start, so we are open for a roundtable, or we're looking forward to a roundtable discussion format. We understand that people are perhaps a bit shy, but there's no need to be shy. Frameworks are fundamentally important, and it's a tricky thing, and supervisors perhaps have different perceptions on whether they call it a conceptual framework or a theoretical framework, but whatever it is. So I think as a very common understanding, we can say we talk about frameworks, and I found, just as a ground setting, I found this quote this morning, which I thought is very well expressing what's the minimum overlap, whatever framework we might talk about, which goes, buildings have different framework, steel, concrete, wood, which provides the main structure. And within this framework, different or similar materials are used: carpets, paint, heating. Similarly, research framework, also called strategies, approaches, or designs, provide a structure within which different or similar data collection methods are used. A research design might be based on more than one framework. Frameworks may overlap, and a framework can involve a combination of different data collection methods and analyzers. So I think this is broadly providing an overview that at a minimum, frameworks are aimed to provide a structure with some type of structure. So they are something for us to build on. And I think this is inherent to how science and the research process works, where you are not expected to come up with something and make it out of the blue, but you're expected to work over related research, related studies, something that already exists. So exactly, you won't invent to build a house. If the purpose is to build a house, there have been other people that have been doing it. So if other people have been doing it, we already can understand a house has walls, a house will have a floor. Typically houses nowadays have windows, they have some sort of roofing, and all of that is something we can be building on. So the question now into the round, what is your house? How have you come to the understanding and idea that you would want to build a house? Why didn't you consider building a tent or another building on where to spend your night? And are there anyone that want to come forward and just?
That was actually a nice text in the chat. Should I read it? I thought conceptual framework is a summary of the variables in the study and how they relate to each other. Okay, while theoretical framework is a summary of the relevant literature review and the gaps. Okay, from the introduction, you have used them interchangeably. Please clarify. That is what we will do actually. We will clarify that actually in detail. How you started, I definitely agree with that. But as I said, let us talk about that maybe a little bit later. What I would like to have really, as I said, is there somebody who would just bring a framework you are using or you are planning to use or you have used actually within your PhD or DBA research or any other research? And then we can actually together try to discuss it, and you can actually, get some feedback, or maybe you can tell us why you have picked these things. Because, I don't know, I don't want to go too deep right now, but I usually say that, in my lectures, I usually say the conceptual framework or conceptual model, if you want to, shapes it all. That is how I'm saying it, because based on the conceptual framework or theoretical framework, we'll discuss the differences afterwards, you really understand what is going on. And as you have mentioned, Jane, it is about the variables and the relationships between them. So will anybody come with a nice, interesting, or not finalized, still in creation framework? Do we have anybody?
I saw that in the forum, in the webinar forum, Wei Leong was putting forward a challenge that he's facing with regards to framework. Wei Leong, do you want me to read out what you were posting at the forum, or do you quickly want to explain your challenge that you are facing?
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
I'm sorry, Professor Bostjan, I don't have a framework yet, but in my research, I've come across a few different frameworks relating to my area of research, and so the thing is, first of all, like what you mentioned just now, being able to distinguish what is a theoretical framework, what is a conceptual framework, which we will get to later on. But also in terms of my question, scholars have published their frameworks in their research articles, right? So how do we classify those frameworks? Are they theoretical or are they conceptual? And also another question I have is, in trying to develop my own framework for my DBA, can I combine elements of other people's framework, or must it be a totally new framework that I have to come up with?
Maybe if I can answer the second part.
Yes, please, Bostjan.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is what we usually do. I mean, as you have mentioned, you said you have read many papers, and in those papers you have seen maybe something like that, okay? First variable, second variable, third variable. And all those variables are, let's say, kind of independent, let's say these are the independent variable, and here you have actually something called as a dependent variable. And what the study, let's say you have read, has kind of studied was, let us make it simple today, okay? Was the relationship between those three variables, or four, let's say, okay, altogether, dependent and independent. That was in the literature. That is what you saw there, okay? I don't want to go now into that, was that a conceptual or theoretical framework? But let's say that was a framework you have read there, okay? What you can definitely do after you have read a lot more, let's say, of different papers, you might say, I would like to test this box. It's maybe interesting. And then you go and read further and say, wow, why not this one? Let us add this one here and try to actually study this relationship. Or if I go back to the green color, actually I can take this one. And at one point you will say, oh, so many guys have already done actually this relationship. So it's not of interest for me anymore. I can actually remove that out. It's not of my interest. And finally, you might actually end up with a new conceptual framework for your research. Okay? Theoretically, you might go, oh, I read somewhere else something of, I don't know, extreme interest, and I would like to test that as well. And you come and you add maybe, I don't know, mediating variable in here. And then you go, I would like to check whether this relationship between, let's say, call it, I don't know how we can call it, let's say, hypothesis 3, if you want to, in this case, is actually true, or things are changing whenever you are bringing actually another mediating variable in here. Okay, so say piece by piece or slowly, while you are reading, while you are reconsidering things, while you are thinking, based on that, you will be finally built up something what will be guiding your research. And that is why I'm saying that the conceptual framework kind of shapes it all. Because after you have done that, everything is in a way clear for everyone who is actually checking your or reading your thesis or your, doesn't matter what it is, or your journal paper. You see that and you say, okay, everything's clear. On the left side, as usually, are my independent variables. You can even say that that is theoretically now, if I go and go a little bit deeper and say, okay, that is my, let's say, construct, which has 1, 2, 3, 4 different dimensions. On the other side, you have another construct, could be just one, or you can add here as well something. Okay, I don't know, I can take another color or same color. You can say, okay, I'll be adding this dependent variable because I would like to check those relationships actually as well, if that's working or not working. And then here you have actually your dependent variables constructs, and we built another, let's say, mediation. But you can go even farther. I mean, I don't want to make it complicated. I just want to show that things are developing while you are reading. You can easily add something else and say, okay, maybe I read somewhere and that could be interesting as well, that I check whether there is, let's say, a moderation or something like that in my framework. And what this variable, let's say, is influencing, weakening or strengthening actually this relationship between those two variables. So that is how it goes. You know, I usually say, start with your first idea, put it on your ceiling or put it on your wall. And then while you are reading, you can actually slowly following how the things are developing. And that is how actually really you can follow your thoughts, you can follow actually your, how should I say, development of your research. Because after you have done that and you say, okay, that is my final framework, definitely discuss with your supervisors, agreed upon, you are actually done. You have your variables, you have your dependent variables, you have your independent variables, as we said here. You can say here, I have mediation if you want to, mediating variable. Then you can have theoretically, I don't say that you have to have all of them. I mean, definitely not. Your moderating variable if you want to, and that's your framework. And based on that, you will be shaping then your hypothesis. They're here seen, as well as the next stage will be then choosing the proper methodology to be answered to test all those relationships. So that is how it usually goes. And the more the colors, the nicer it looks like at the end, because that means that you are thinking, that you are adding stuff, that you are actually considering different views, that you are considering different research, let's say, options or different frameworks, but you want to see it from a different perspective. That's why you are adding something additionally and things like that. So that is how we usually try to, support, let's say, the thoughts that we are really building up a framework which will then finally express what we are trying to do. I hope I was not too long. I know, wait, have I answered a little bit your second part of the question?
Yes, sir, you certainly did. Thank you.
So you can easily, not easily, that because at the end, as you have seen right now, it became something totally different. We started in the beginning with the 3 independent variables. That was actually our starting point with those 3 dimensions. And we had, let's say, here one dependent variable. But while you are reading, you got actually additional information and you were starting actually to build something else. So you can easily, should I now provoke a little bit, take a clear theoretical framework, which you will be, should I say, upgrading, changing, whatever it is, actually giving it your own views. And by that, you will be kind of changing, upgrading your theoretical framework into your conceptual framework.
Yeah, and perhaps to just add, it's not only the reading. I mean, in most of the cases, at least in the social sciences, it's also your own observations. So it's what comes in on information and knowledge that you hold.
I totally, but that is what I meant. I mean, I didn't say that you have to. I mean, you know what we added. Let's say the blue, the green, the brown, the yellow. That is actually based on your understanding different things and your own view on that. That's why you are trying to add those things, because you see them in a different way. And that's, I mean, for me, reading means that actually you are getting broader, you think in different ways, different, let's say, ideas are triggered. And based on that, you will be kind of, building up new things. And definitely just based on your, should I say, I should not use the word imagination. Andreas doesn't want it, but
No.
in a way, your, let's say, your growth of knowledge.
Exactly, your observation, your understanding, the analysis that you're taking into. I mean, we have seen how the initial 3 red boxes that Bostjan was nicely drawing here have been quickly expanding with other boxes, which represents new knowledge, different knowledge, knowledge from the literature, but also knowledge that you have from observing and analyzing the problem on the ground, your research area, what is happening there, and then you analyze it against the literature as well against the data in itself. And as you go along, you will find more studies. All of those studies will have some framework, be it theoretical or conceptual ones. And you will take from those studies, from those existing frameworks,
just
parts,
ideas sometimes, okay? Knowledge and ideas, and then you build that actually into your own framework.
See why I'm so hesitant with my words? Because I looked for another word, a synonym for ideas, to not give people here ideas, which it's always great to have ideas, but ideas can carry you away. But if you look into existing studies, there are clear conceptual or theoretical frameworks used, and they will have, the authors will have put good thought in it, whether or not those frameworks were suitable for their research. So all that you need to do, and the all is a heavy decision, is to understand what is matching from those studies for your study. What do you want to do? And this clarity, I think, is paramount for you to develop in order to build together your ultimate framework. So it's an evolutionary thing. Putting your framework together is an evolutionary thing. It's not a one-time off activity. I mean, it will start very simple, as Bostjan put it here, 3 boxes. So you find the first research paper where you say, yes, this is looking exactly at the problems that I'm also looking at. So how have they been doing it? They talked with those people, qualitative research. They conducted those interviews, surveys, quantitative. Okay, so over there, you start out. Did that work out well? Yeah, they seem to have gotten good findings. That makes sense to me. They are plausible. Okay, so it worked out. Very important. Now you find more studies. Which frameworks did they use? Which methods within those frameworks did they use? Could or would you want to use them? Why would you want to use them? Because I want to check what's in the green box down there. Oh, do I come up here with ideas? Perhaps. Or do I exactly build on existing frameworks that could be reused? So this is how you build up your framework slowly over the time. And as you keep notes and records of what you are doing, you also will understand how your framework changed. So it's very important for you to take notes and keep records. So you do understand how your framework looks at the start of the research, and you will understand how it evolved until the end of the research. And you will be able, by keeping a record, to go back and see what changed, how it changed, and what that perhaps did imply for your study. So it's an integrated part of your study. Bostjan, yes, please.
What Andreas is saying, kind of keeping the record, I will say you have to justify and you have to cite, let's say, then the ideas. Where did you get them? How did you get them? Why do you think that let's say, these relationships here, let's say, is really existing? It is not just that you say, okay, I think it is there. You have to bring actually some justification, let's say, for this hypothesis number 2, for example. And yeah, you will be using actually what you have read, let's say, from different areas or different papers, or maybe just one paper, it depends, that you will be able to justify that. Because that's kind of important, that you have kind of a clear justification, I would say, for each of the relationships which will be finally there. Because if you go now back, let's say, and use the word theoretical framework, in that case, you just take a framework which has been already established, and it is seen as a theory. And
let's perhaps pick on that, Bostjan. How would you, sorry.
Yeah, just saying, you know, based on that, you say, okay, I don't know, theoretically, one of the simple ones, maybe you have heard about it or studied about it, is kind of the, I don't know, let's say, theory of reasoned action. Have you heard about it? Social science is quite actually almost there, or maybe guys who are using, I don't know, technology acceptance model or something like that. Have you heard about that? At one point, TAM 2 and things like that. So that would be kind of simple models which are out there and many times used. And then you can go, okay, that is there. So I would like to start, let's say, about, theory of reasoned action. Theory of reasoned action talks about attitudes and subjective norms, how they are influencing, let's say, the intention of a behavior, and then at the end you are trying to measure that behavior. So how those things are linked together. You can take that and then actually for different, let's say, contexts or different other ideas, you are adding something additionally. Maybe the inputs for the attitudes can be different or something like that. So that means there is a theory out there. It's a clear conceptual framework. You can test it. That would be then, as we said, theoretical framework you are using. But whenever you are then changing, adding, growing something, let's say in order to understand these things better, or make a combination of different ones. And that is actually has been done as well. I mean, if you just, as I mentioned right now, even if you go with the theory of acceptance model, let's say, the TAM has used parts of the theory of planned behavior. And that is actually how it was finally then, developed based on the, at the end, actually on the evidence. So things like that, I don't know, are we kind of there or not? There are no questions right now. I don't know why. Are we making it too complicated or not? Just come with your questions. Or I'm extremely happy that we developed together a framework for one of you, if you want to. If you mention actually a few, I don't know, your thoughts about independent variables, or what would you like to see, how that influences dependent variable or not. Because if not, then we will go actually and go through our slides in order to discuss the differences.
How do I get the whiteboard?
It is. It's done. It's gone.
That's the magic. So let's look at those frameworks. So what I think one of the tricky things, or at least it was tricky once I was undertaking my PhD, you're asked, so what's your theoretical framework? What's your conceptual framework? Well, that assumes you would have selected something. But if you're asked the question that way, you will look into the literature that way. So which theoretical framework do I use? Which conceptual framework do I use? Let me check. Oh yeah, that framework. You see, the purpose of you once going out and searching becomes you look for a framework. It's like take school education. Now, which grade have you gotten? I got a B grade. So you don't. It's not the subject that's driving the narrative. What have we been doing in mathematics this week? What have we been learning, right? So if you change the narrative, like where do I sleep tonight? In a tent or in a house? In a house, okay, but I don't have a house. Well, that will be tough for you to build up a house in a day. So perhaps you need to sleep in a tent. How do I get a tent? Yeah, so the narrative then moves away. How do I get a tent? Because I need something for tonight to sleep in. Or I need something for next year so I can build a house. Which house do you want to build? I only have 50K. Yeah, with that you only get a pre-built house, right? So variables come in slowly because you build up your understanding. Likewise, how do you get to your framework? Yeah. Do I need a theoretical framework? Do I need a conceptual framework? And you can discuss this on an abstract level, or you discuss it on a very concrete level. Yeah. So this is also where the relation to a concept comes in. Yeah, it's a roadmap for you to conduct your research. It can assist you visualizing the research, but that also means you don't dream it up. Yeah, you build up a roadmap slowly because you know where you are and where you want to go to. What do I want to understand? Yeah, I want to understand how can I sleep tonight in a walled place or in a secure place. So only a tent can give me that, or a hotel, right? Bostjan, please. You're muted, I think.
As we have discussed, I mean, before, see, what are we saying? I mean, you have here a concept. I mean, that's an idea, and you would kind of follow that concept, which, as we said, is developing. I mean, usually you always start with something. Probably the first idea actually of your research is anyway something simple as that. How is whatever influencing something else? And after you will be discussing, reading, reconsidering things, then you will be, as we said, adding different things additionally. So roadmap is kind of a good word, I would say, for that, because based on that, you really see, you present it. And I really have to assure you that I always see, I mean, for the DBA and PhD students, it'll be different because you are more advanced. But if I go one step, let's say, lower, or one level lower to the master students, they are not actually there yet. And whenever then we start talking about conceptual framework, using the boxes and things like that, they start understanding it, in which direction that should go. And that is why it's really kind of a roadmap, because based on that, they see what they want to do. You know, you have it actually in front of you, and really it helps you. And as who was that? Was it Wei said in the beginning? No, Jane was, sorry. It is about variables and the relationships between those variables. And you have finally, as I said before, test actually exactly that, how they relate to each other. And that's kind of the idea. And that's, as I said, the next stage goes then towards the methodology, because for different, let's say, frameworks, you will use different types of, if we are now doing quantitative methodology, let's say different statistical methods in order to be able to test that. So can you bring the next slide? I don't know if I have a control.
I can bring the next slide on.
Yeah.
You need to wipe the drawing, though.
Do I have to? Once again, it's so nice. I don't want to do that. And yeah, don't think that actually we are talking about conceptual frameworks just in case when we have quantitative research. But for me, it is kind of easier, I guess, to explain it. And that's why usually I start with boxes and I'm talking about relationships and then statistical tests. But the same thing is actually for the qualitative research or qualitative methodology finally afterwards, because you are kind of building. Doesn't matter, is it now based on literature, or, I mean, if we go and make it a little bit more complex or complicated, many times, as we said, we start with the qualitative research in order to explore what are at all the possible actually factors, or the factors which will finally, let's say, become variables. That is the first stage. And based on that, you will be, through your analysis of your interviews, you might slowly build. After you have read actually, let's say, 2 transcripts, you will build something like that. Then another guy comes with something else, as I said before, and then you will be adding, okay, and that should be there as well, and things like that, okay? And then you will be, based on the qualitative research, kind of building your framework. And you can stop here and say, that was actually the idea, to understand what are at all the relationships regarding the topic I'm dealing with. But then if you want to, you can go one step further, and then you will be testing, let's say, your framework you have built, your conceptual framework you have built. So that's kind of the idea behind it. If you know it, as we said before, from the theory, from previous papers, there are theories, there are theoretical frameworks, there are, let's say, models out there, then you can definitely go and start with a quantitative from the, in the first place. You don't have to go and talk. Or what do we do sometimes? I mean, many times I do within my PhDs, is that we have actually kind of an idea of a theoretical framework, but then we want to build up upon that. And then we go actually and discuss further in the qualitative part to be able, as we said before, to add some additional boxes, let's say, into the existing model, or maybe some new relationships, as we said, some, I don't know, moderation, mediation or something like that. So that is how it goes. So once again, it doesn't matter, are we talking about quantitative, where we'll be kind of trying to work rather on the objective way, where we are then, as we said, testing those things, or are we dealing with the qualitative research, where we'll be kind of trying, as I mentioned before, to explore different factors, or if you want to pick topics, or finally we end up with the themes, and these themes will be then built into your framework. Any questions? Guys, you are so silent today. I don't know. Whenever I'm not getting feedback, I'm always a little bit nervous.
Oh, you don't need to be nervous or shy, Bostjan.
Okay, I'm not shy, I'm nervous that things are not running in the proper direction.
Are there any questions in the room so far? Any points to be clarified? Any doubts on how to identify your framework? I mean, certainly there will be doubts, but are there any clear to be vocalized? I recall still that once I was asked to come up with a framework, that was quite a challenge. Now I looked by that time back, my research was about why is higher education still not taking advantage of the opportunities that the internet provides. So that was why is it outdated? Why do I need to write a SQL test on paper instead of using a computer? Why is the course 20 years old and no one dared to update it? Now, if I go out at the internet, Google provides me with up-to-date learning resources. Why can't higher education do that? So that was the starting point of my research. And so how do I get to a framework to there? I exactly asked, why is it that courses are 20 years old and outdated? And then the answer from a research group in the United States at the University of Colorado Boulder was because the design principle of courses is a one-time off, so it's made and done. If you would apply different design principles, like you have, for example, in open source software, or generally in software, where you have a design time and a use time, and during the use time, you check if the course is adequately used as it was meant to be in the design time. And afterwards, you go back into the design time and you update the course. So you have a release, how is it used, understand what worked out well, what not, then again, redesign. So you have a very different design principle. So this became my underlying framework, right? Because this research group already spent like 10 years on looking at the problem. They understood very well what was going on there. And they said, that was their shot taken, look, if you see it works in open source software communities, up-to-date learning resources, they will be adapted on a daily base or permanent base. Why? Because they have a different way of work. So they compared those two ways, and that became my framework, right? And obviously, those guys with 10 years of experience, they had a great deal of other research papers that they put in there of other concepts. So there was a lot of theory, right? So I was covered for both the theory side and the conceptual side. Now, if you would ask me, did I use a conceptual framework or a theoretical framework, and where was the boundary in between the one or the other? Well, I can certainly say which part was from the concept, but which part belonged to the theory, where was the boundary? I'm not that sure. There was a hell lot of theory in there, right? But by the end of the day, having understood what those research teams were doing, I had a very good understanding on what was going on the research problems that I was looking at, and I was also understanding what was still unknown. So why is higher education not doing it? If those teams, even from higher education research teams, they know about it, they could do it different. Why is it not done differently? And there were plausible reasons why it's not done. And you could group them by technical reasons, legal reasons, organizational reasons, cultural reasons, right? So my outcome was exactly this contribution, that I looked through those different categories, which then became part of my adapted framework, conceptual framework. Could I have presented that framework at the beginning of my research? No. Did it look well at the end of my research? I think it looked good enough to get me the degree.
That was a fair answer.
Yeah, not to be arrogant here.
Okay. So the next slide I should clear my nice drawings. The next slide actually tells exactly what we have been doing, kind of, you know. I mean, the first sentence is extremely important. I guess we have discussed it. A conceptual framework has to be developed before you are doing your research. As I said, before you start doing your research, because you have to understand all the variables, you have to understand all the relationships, and based on that, you will start collecting the data, as well as afterwards pick actually the proper methods in order to be able to test or verify or whatever it is actually these relationships. As we have said, conceptual framework, what we did, it was kind of a diagram, what we kind of have drawn. And I, once again, really encourage every one of you that you do something like that. I mean, written ones are there as well, but I usually say, you know, you can read 5 pages and at the end you will not get it. But if you use a nice diagram or flow chart or something like that, things will be definitely clear how the things are running and what are the relationships, and what is input, what is output, what is, anyway, I mean, as we said, we discussed that, I guess. And as we mentioned, sure, it is possible to combine, let's say, 1-2 different frameworks or even more, or add actually additional constructs or add additional dimensions. You can start, as we said before, let's say that is my construct, and I start, let's say, in the beginning with 2 dimensions, and then I go read, discuss, have evidence, and then easily, as we mentioned, I can upgrade that actually, let's say, to 4 different dimensions for the, let's say, independent variable construct. Definitely, we do that. We should do that even, I guess, because that will give us finally the novelty as well. Don't forget, whenever we are just kind of taking, I don't know, should I say that or not, but taking a clear theoretical framework, that means that you are testing something what has been done. That means it can be in another environment or something like that, but that is really not, I usually say, really a real contribution. It is just actually, another environment, let's say, context, but not really developing something new. But when you go deep, think, reconsider things for a while, you will definitely find actually something which is your own novel framework.
But at the risk, no, not at the risk. I think the word novel is what scares me off, because that could lead to the fact that, again, the narrative is changed from what is novel in here, rather than what do I understand or do not understand. So novel will come with understanding and better understanding and better understanding and understanding what is not known. At one point in time, you will know more than other people. So by definition, that would mean it's novel, right? And you will have done something that hasn't been done in a way by others, to a tiny degree, perhaps only, but again, then that's novel. So please Understand, novel is a dangerous word.
But it has to be there in research.
It does need to be there. I'm aware of that, critical aware. But it's again like in high school. You don't get an A+ because you want to get an A+. You get an A+ because you knew it very good. So
I was never actually keen to get high grades. Okay, so that's my problem probably. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Now let us go to the. Was that first question from Jane, or was it actually? Yeah, I guess. You said kind of what's the difference between the theoretical and conceptual framework? No, if you can give me the previous slide, please.
This one? Okay.
Yep. Because here, let us start with here. What does it say? Theories are established and validated by experiments and evidence. That means if I draw once again something like that, and that has been often tested and verified, at one point we will probably say, okay, this is a theory, which is valid. So if you take something like that from the literature review, a theory which has been established, you will know exactly what are your independent variables, what are, let's say, your dependent variables. You will know that these relationships have been established, tested. So that is a theory. I can use it, and I'm sure, I don't want to say that it will always work, but theoretically is there, has been verified. So that's the big difference, I would say, between now even theoretical framework and conceptual framework. With this one, you should not change too much unless we go a step farther. And I can see and say that sometimes we do that as well, that we say, okay, let us add here something, maybe from another theory. And then we can still talk in a way that that is, but I don't want to go into that direction too much, that it is still actually a theoretical framework. So for me, a clear theoretical framework would be that you take things actually from the theory, literature, and yeah, you say that is my theoretical framework. As I said, sometimes we go a little bit farther, but I rather tend to say that then we are building a conceptual framework. Okay, so once again, as we said, support research, your research in this case, by describing, or let's say, or drawing from relevant theoretical aspects obtained in previous work. Okay, so that means you are taking something what has been already established, and you will apply these known relationships and these known concepts in your research. Okay, can you change
Move the slide?
Yep.
Yes.
Let me clear that.
Cleared.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess we have already discussed actually this one as well. So once again, it is here. Andreas will say maybe something else, but it is here actually definitely about a lot of reading. That means that you do understand the literature, but that doesn't matter not just for the theoretical part. I always kind of am happy that my students are reading a lot, and based on that knowledge and their actually experiences, views and stuff like that, are then adding something to the literature, to the theoretical framework, and build their kind of own stuff.
I have nothing against reading, but I like focused reading much more than exploratory reading, which doesn't lead to anything, right?
Okay,
I think this is the only comment on that. So you should know, why are you reading? Is it just because you're curious? That's a bad thing. Not that you're curious, that's a good thing. But if you're reading just because you're curious, that's a bad thing, because you can waste a lot of time.
Okay,
if you understand what you do not understand and read to understand it better, that's a focused way of reading.
Okay, so maybe the last sentence will answer you a lot as well. Kind of what we are trying to say here is actually that, yeah, all the variables, let's say, as well as the relationships are supported, linked, justified, whatever you want to, actually by different theories. So that's the big difference. But the next two slides, the next, where are we now? Yeah, the next two slides will actually, one slide.
Okay, but before we come to the next two slides, let me just, so where do the variables come from? They surely will come in parts from the literature, but once again, you do more often than not, and in particular in the social sciences, you do hold knowledge. So you will have seen, you will have looked into the variables naturally. Yeah, you see that higher education.
But not in the case of the theoretical framework.
Not in the framework, but the variables you
Okay.
will understand, right? So it's something where you can work over what you see. And this is how you can find the theory, because you do know some of the variables. So you can ground, again, your reading based upon the knowledge that you already do hold today. So with this, I'm moving then forward. Bostjan, please.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could answer the questions rather than go through this slide, because this slide will kind of clearly just tell you, I would say, once again, what we have discussed is actually kind of a clear differentiation between the conceptual framework and the theoretical framework. And I guess we have, I hope at least actually discussed quite in, I hope presented in detail, but that is kind of the summary of what we tried actually to tell you. Okay. So that's my, but if, as I said, I mean, I can talk about it definitely, but I would rather go, because time is actually running fast, that we go actually and discuss the potential questions, and maybe even based on our discussion today, maybe, draw a new conceptual framework or something like that.
Okay, then let's move into the end of the recorded part, because usually discussion at the end is off the record. So with this, let's move into the last slide. For those that have been at our website recently, and for those that have not been, we just got an upgrade, or what we think an upgrade. So we tried to make your journey more guided and focused. So we have developed and put into place 6 research stages with 25 steps that it takes from start to end. And we did that with the intention of providing you super tight guidance and for you to understand where are you in your research journey and what is the next thing to come and which type of information do I need for this next step and to accomplish it. So you will see a redesigned website, and this is just a start. We will try to make it much more modular over the coming months, so to get you through each of the steps with as much guidance as possible from start to end of your journey. Yeah, that's basically what is the recorded part. And now, Anna, could you stop the recording, please? You're the host.